Hi there, welcome back. I'm Iris, the designer behind Hiris Makes, and welcome to another episode. So today I have a really special episode where I have invited Julie from Black Isle Yarns to have a chat with me all about her business, sustainability, a little bit about gin as well, don't know. So we talk all things yarn, fibre, and sustainability. So yeah, here it goes.
Hi, Iris. Ooh.
Hello.
I don't know if you saw, I did like a video of all the kind of yarns in my stash that I thought were like sustainable in inverted commas.
I did see that. It was really lovely.
Yeah, so and that kind of got me thinking that I don't really know that much about it, or not as much as I could know. So it would be nice to talk to people about their individual things and see kind of from their perspective how they think about making things sustainable, and which bits of like sustainability you're most interested in, because I think it's a huge topic, right? It's not just one aspect, right? There's loads of parts. So that was kind of the idea. And yeah, I still haven't actually knitted anything with this. I made a swatch, which I should have got out. I had a bit of a kind of, I don't know, like a design block lately, but I have some ideas. So
there's no rush whatsoever. So and then just no pressure. It's just if ever something occurs to you, that would be really nice. But yeah, no, it design is quite tricky. It gets sort of, ideas come and go sometimes, don't they? And just you go through phases where it always goes swimmingly, and then phases where it doesn't.
Yeah, where basically nothing happens. No, I have some ideas. We'll see. It's just been busy few weeks. So yeah, I guess I can start by asking you a few little questions, just to get the thoughts flowing. But if there's anything that you were thinking about as well that you specifically wanted to talk about, we can do that as well, of course. So I guess the first obvious question is, what made you kind of start doing Black Isle yarns? What was your motivation?
It was almost slightly accidental. I didn't really plan to start a yarn company or anything in particular. At the time, I was doing quite a lot of quilting and sewing quilt commissions and creating quilt designs for one of the British quilting magazines. But some of the people that I knew on Instagram were natural dyeing, and I was really intrigued. I studied ecology at university, and the plant side of ecology was always what interested me the most. So I started doing a little bit of plant dyeing, just things I could gather. And I wasn't a huge knitter at the time, so I didn't actually have that much yarn. So I had to buy yarn with which to dye. And I didn't, I couldn't find British yarn, or there was virtually none. And certainly trying to find any yarn that told me where it came from was at that point almost impossible. And my parents had a small holding, and we had sheep growing up, and I just couldn't, I did not want to be using wool that I didn't know where it came from. Or sometimes you couldn't even tell the breed of sheep. And
yeah, it just says wool, right?
yeah. And so just because of my background, because I grew up with, we had about 60 odd ewes at some points, so we had a fair number of sheep, and I also worked in forestry, so I was very used to land management and thinking about how land's managed. And I just didn't like the idea of, especially if I was naturally dyeing, I wanted to know where the wool came from. So
yeah,
so I then started thinking, well, it must be possible to know where the wool comes from, because there's plenty of wool. I knew fine well there's so much wool out there, and that farmers are getting so little for it. So I did a little bit of hunting and found that there's a wee mill in the south of Scotland called the Border Mill, who do commission spinning. And I contacted them, and they don't really even have minimum spin quantities. They'll spin even just one fleece at a time. And they're fantastic. John and Juliet and Kate, John and Juliet are the business owners, and Kate's the sort of manages the spinning. And they're fantastic to work with. So speaking to them, I thought, oh well, that's cool. I'll just buy a few fleeces, have some spun that I can then dye for myself.
Oh, that's really cool, because
yeah,
I never even thought of doing that when I was like trying to source wool, because I thought, oh, there's no way, you know, that you could get it spun anywhere. But that's really cool that they do like small amounts. Do they still do it like that, or have they changed a bit?
No, they still. I mean, you still could have a tiny amount spun with them, and I still use them for my smaller batches because they spin beautifully and they're really great to deal with. They are now extremely busy, and they are increasing capacity all the time. But as all the mills are, they're really busy. What they will do though is give you a pretty accurate timescales, and you can book a slot. So I book sort of 2 years ahead.
Wow.
And have X kilos of whatever breed would be coming in at say October, and I know it'll be back probably within 8 or 12 weeks of then, which is that's a quick turnaround compared to a lot of the other mills, and they're fantastic about letting me know if there's going to be a delay. So they're brilliant to work with. So if anybody's interested in, just for curiosity or whatever, having some yarn spun, then the Border Mill is fantastic. But you might, although if it's a wee small bit, they might be able to sneak it in between other things. It's always worth calling them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure there are people who have their own sheep, or who have like neighbors or people they know, right? And they just want to try it out. That's really cool. I didn't even really think you could do a small batch, so that's quite interesting.
I think I was just lucky that I happened to find the Border Mill, and at that point I don't think they were doing all that many commission spins, and they set up as an alpaca mill, and they had their own alpacas. They don't have their own alpacas anymore, so they were far more experienced at spinning alpaca, and me sending in sheep fleece was quite I mean, I think they had done some, but not. I was just relatively early of people doing commission spinning with sheep fleece for them. So some of them caused them a lot of problems. The first lot of Shetland wool I sent them caused them a lot of headaches because it's quite a short fibre. That's one of the reasons there's often woolen spun rather than worsted spun. The Border Mill they're worsted spinners, so they really struggled with the short staple length. They've changed the setup a bit, and they can cope with it better. I'm just realizing I've been dyeing today, so my fingers are funny.
That's fine. It's completely normal, I think, for a dye.
I'm sure you do the same.
Yeah. Is it purple? Or is it like log pudding?
It's cochineal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, nice.
Makes you look a bit more pink. So yeah, I guess that's how you got into it. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people who get into naturally dyeing yarn don't actually come from a knitting background.
Yeah.
Feeling that it's a lot of textile sort of people that get into it more than kind of wool side. I don't know if that's maybe more of a newer thing, actually, the dyeing. Maybe not newer, but kind of as knitting has grown in popularity, I guess that's one of the ways you can like put it out there, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it often seems to be people who do have an innate liking for plants and the environment and the countryside or whatever. Then just it strikes that little spark of curiosity about, oh gosh, I wonder what I could do. What just it's amazing what you can produce from plants.
Yeah.
And well, I do use cochineal as well, so not only plants.
Yeah, but they are good. So
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's very amazing. So I guess one other thing I wanted to ask was, your brand is obviously called Black Isle Yarns. So you are on like a little sort of islandy. It's like a
peninsula.
Peninsula.
Yeah. So it's I don't know why. I'm not really sure why it ended up. It is almost an island, and I guess in the past it effectively operated as an island. As you go up the east coast of Scotland, there's a couple of big firths that cut in, and so to get from, we're just north of Inverness, to get from Inverness onto the Black Isle in the past, you would have had to catch a ferry. I don't think the bridge was put in until the 1980s, so otherwise it's a much longer way round to the head of the firth from Inverness and then back. So it would take you about an hour these days to drive, whereas the bridge takes you over, and so we're only half an hour from Inverness.
Oh, okay. That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, so it's about 20 miles long and about 10 miles wide. So it's a wee small peninsula with just a 7-ish, something like that, small villages and a population of just a few thousand. But it's a lovely place to live.
It sounds lovely, and I
Yeah,
always see
it's
the
really
pictures.
good.
It looks really nice. Did you grow up there, or did you move?
No, I grew up in the south of Scotland, so just south and east of Edinburgh in East Lothian, which is also lovely, but it's big. That's big arable farming country. I mean, there are some sheep and cattle, but it's really fertile. So it's different from the Black Isle's one of the most fertile parts of the Highlands. We've got really nice soil, so most of the Highlands there is no crop production at all, but there is some on the Black Isle, and we're a wee bit lower and more gentle. So one of the theories that the reason the Black Isle is called the Black Isle is because through the winter we get less snow because we're quite low lying and we've got the sea almost all around us. And also because the soil's a nice deep dark colour, so maybe that's I don't know, but it's Eilean Dhu is the Gaelic, so Dhu is black and Eilean is island. And
okay, so it's neither of those things, but sort of both of them.
Yes.
No, that's really interesting. My parents, when I was a kid, when I was between the ages of 1 and 4, I lived in St Andrews.
Oh, fantastic.
We lived there, yeah.
Were they working in St Andrews?
Yeah, my parents are marine biologists. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got into all of this natural dyeing and things as well, right?
Yeah.
Because we were always out, more at the sea, but in collecting samples and things. So yeah, no, that was really nice. So we were in St Andrews for a few years. We lived in King's Barnes, which now has a big golf course again.
Oh, it's got a huge big golf course and hotel, hasn't it?
Yeah. But when we lived there, I think the golf course wasn't there, so it was just a tiny village, and now I think it's more of a thing.
I think I think it gets quite a lot of visitors these days.
It's quite funny. But
yeah, it'd be totally different.
Yeah, I think they have a gin distillery as well. I went there recently. It was quite nice.
Excellent. We can't beat a bit of nice gin.
Exactly. Are there any whiskey distilleries on the Black Isle? No,
and nobody so far set up a gin distillery either. There's a lot of a lot of distilleries popping up, but there are possibly a little bit of a market gap. We have two breweries. So there's two lots of beer. There's Cromarty Brewery and Black Isle Beer. Black Isle Beer is organic and quite well known. Cromarty's a bit smaller. So but no whiskey.
No whiskey yet, not yet. That's cool. Yeah, so I guess you already spoke a bit about kind of the processing of the yarn and the mills, but kind of wanted to ask, how specifically do you source your yarn or your wool now that you use?
So it grew quite slowly, and I guess a lot by word of mouth or just chatting to people. So the very first set of fleeces I bought were from wee small holding on the Black Isle. They grow organic veg for veg boxes. So I already got a veg box from Dan and Rachel at Fernywell, and I knew they had some sheep. So I just contacted Dan and said, what do you do with your fleeces? If you don't have a good use for them, can I buy them? And I mean, their flock is Gotland, so they're not quite pure. I refer to them as Gotland-ish. They're Gotland with a little bit of Shetland and a little bit of Charlie genes in them. So I knew that the fleeces would be lovely, and they were I think they were sometimes going around trees for mulch, or they put them around the edge of the huge big polytunnel to keep slugs out, help keep slugs out. So I mean, because there was no point in them doing anything else with them because they got so little for them. No. So I was very lucky that the first lot of fleeces I had were just really lovely. It's really lovely wool, and I still buy the Fernywell fleeces every year. And then I can't quite remember. I think fairly early on I started thinking about Shetland wool, so I contacted the Shetland Sheep Society and got the contact details for the rep for the north of Scotland, who's a lovely older lady called Sally, and she's a crafter. Quite a lot of the people with small Shetland flocks are crafters, so they're really, really into the producing the high quality fleeces. So I think I was just lucky again that Sally, I happened to get in touch with Sally, and then she put me in touch with other people. And then on the Black Isle itself, I buy a lot of Cheviot wool from, I guess, 2 main flocks, and I go to the south of the Black Isle there's a pedigree blueface, it's a big pedigree blueface Leicester breeding farm called the R, and I buy all their hog clips, so that's the first clip, and that goes into Cullen that you have.
Oh yes, yeah.
And yeah, and then it's just sort of word of mouth and chat. Quite a few people have contacted me, and I get contact. I often so I haven't had anyone email me for a little while, but I get emails and phone calls saying, "Would you like my fleece?" And I often just have to say no, because yeah, I would love to buy it all, but I just have to fit with what batch I know I've got planned and what breeds I want. And
yeah,
the stumbling block is the mills, as you've probably picked up from other people.
Yes, I have a little bit. Yeah.
So hard to. I currently work with the Border Mill, who are the ones I was chatting about in the south of Scotland, and New Lanark, who are also they're the southwest of Scotland. So I have what for me is a really big batch, woolen spun with them, and my Shetland gets worsted spun by the Natural Fibre Company, and they do that beautifully, but they're really busy. Well, they're all really busy. And then Cullen is spun by Europa in Yorkshire.
Okay. Yeah, I think I noticed definitely when I was thinking at some point a little bit about maybe trying to get something spun, that there is absolutely basically no mills like in the south.
Yeah,
all of England. It's all I guess Scotland, Yorkshire. I think there might be one like in the Bath area somewhere in the west.
I don't know about that.
Maybe
There's
Wales
certainly
or
one or two in Wales, I think, and I haven't investigated.
Yeah.
There's one that woolen spins in Wales, I think. Yeah, so it's just that the wool industry just dropped out of Britain. Yeah. That's what I guess that's where the fleece prices are so low, and then all the mills that we had have closed. It's really sad.
It doesn't seem likely that people will open new, even though there's a demand. I guess opening a mill is a huge investment, right?
Yeah, I've chatted about it with I have a good friend, Emily Williams, who's a fantastic designer, and she's based in Inverness, and she's an engineer by training. Okay. And we've chatted about it, but because we could set something up along the lines of the Border Mill there, so they buy in kit from Canada, Belfast kit, so you can kind of you plug in different bits of kit from them.
Okay.
So it is possible to set up a mill in a warehouse with new equipment, but the time and energy that would go into setting it up, and you'd have a huge learning experience, a real learning curve early on.
As you mentioned, I'm sure that every fibre is different, right? So you can't just start from no knowledge at all, right?
No, and it's going to vary from one year to the next. You know, I can send off the same batch of fleeces from the same flock, but they are different from what, you know, totally different from one year to the next. So you can think you've mastered whatever it is, and then the next year it'll not do what you think it'll do. So it would be wonderful if more people would set up wee mills, or and there will be a lot. I mean, I don't know very much about it, but there is redundant mill equipment out there, but there
must be
skill to get it back up and running, and to know what you need, and to track it down. It takes
it would be years, I guess. I guess that maybe when they're really busy now, the mills, they'll employ more people will learn.
I guess hope so, yes. And maybe expand, the ones that are there may be able to expand. That would certainly be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I know there's actually just reminded me, talking about King's Barnes and that distillery, they got, I think, like a countryside development grant to set up that distillery there, because obviously a whiskey distillery, I guess, also is a huge investment, and you don't get any return for a really long time. And they got I think quite a big grant, a government grant, to like a countryside development grant to set it up. So I wonder if that's something that like the mill, kind of a new mill, could almost do. But
I imagine there would be funds you could tap into, and certainly in the north of Scotland, we have Highlands and Islands Enterprise, which I would imagine you could pull out funding from them. And I know, just as an incidental, I think one of the reasons that gin distilleries are popping up quite a lot is because gin's got a really quick turnaround, compared to some of the, say, whiskey. I'm not quite sure. I don't know what the minimum time span for whiskey would be, 5 years or 10 years. I'm really not sure. But gin, I think,
long. Gin is like a few weeks, right? You can just
I think it's fast. I was chatting to a group of Americans. I did a pop-up shop for a group of Americans on a tour, and they were saying that we were talking about exactly this, and they were saying that makes complete sense, because it was through prohibition in the States, it was gin that was one of the things that was made and bootlegged. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I think so. That's the same with that King's Barn distillery. I think they want to be a whiskey distillery, but in order to make money more quickly, they do a gin as well.
Yeah, and I wonder. I guess they can use, maybe, I don't know if they use all the same kit, but they at least gets them going in the turnover. So I think it was possibly the very first one that did it. One of the whiskey distilleries on Islay had closed, and it was brought back up and reopened. I think it was Bunnahabhain, but I might be wrong. And in the very first year or two, they started producing the Botanics whiskey, which is gin, which is fantastic. And they actually list on the bottles all the plants that go into the
that's
nice.
Gin,
and some of them are gathered on Islay itself. But that was their business model, and I think they were one of the first ones to work out that was a good way, a good
option.
Yeah.
I wonder if something, I guess it's a strange analogy that we've come down to, but it is sort of similar. It's like they've all kind of shut down, but now there's a new interest, right? And I think hopefully there's something. They all seem to open bars and stuff with it though, so you'd have to have some kind of spinning cafe.
I'm sure there are ways around it. And there is a lady further north from me who is looking to put together a mill. So she's in the process of putting together a business plan and sort of research and speaking to local people to see what the demand is. But as I understand it, I think at the moment she would only go as far as carding. So I guess she's thinking of she'd be producing fibre for spinners, which would be fantastic. But that's less helpful for those of us that don't spin.
Yes, the spinning is a problem. No, I think it's really interesting. Who knows what will kind of happen sort of in the future. I think more and more people are interested in sort of crafting in general, and also in things that are sustainable or local. I think as soon as you become aware of it, it's hard to ignore it. So hopefully it's something that will start building.
I hope so. I tend to think it's a little bit like maybe local food, and how interest in knowing where your food has come from and how it was grown and how far it's traveled, and that has been talked about for significantly longer than I think most people have been talking about it with wool. And there's a sort of a growing level of understanding from people, even if they maybe can't afford to, or they don't have the ability to buy local food. There is beginning to be more of an understanding about that can make an enormous difference to the environment. And I kind of feel that wool and fibre production is a similar it's sort of there's a similar background to it in terms of the impact it can make depending on how it's done, and that hopefully more and more people begin to think about it over time.
Yeah, I hope so. I think from the kind of reaction that I get when I'm talking about it on Instagram and things, I always get a lot of people saying, I just hadn't really thought about it, and you know, this has opened my eyes to it. I really want to kind of improve it in the future. So I think it's just something that unless you know about it, you just don't you don't think about it, or you just think, oh well, you know, it's better than buying clothes already, so you think you're already doing something. So but there is always, I guess, the next step. And I think it doesn't always need to be that expensive, actually, because there's a lot of British wool that's quite cheap, you know, like from the bigger producers as well. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure that
there's.
it's always expensive, actually, either.
I don't think it has to be, and because I think if you know, a lot of the sort of the indie dyers are using the wool that is British spun and non-superwash and so on, and comes from, say, Chester wool. I don't know very much about it because it's not that's not the end of it that I've ever been involved in. But that wool that we, you know, will have pretty good environmental credentials. And although some of the wool that are spun for the dyers then use isn't necessarily British, but some of it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and there's definitely more and more of the British dyers looking at what the fibre they are using is, even if it's they're not having it spun themselves. You know, even so, I think I suspect there's a bit of a growing push back to the mills that they buy from for what it is that they're wanting to use.
Yeah, I think definitely that's the case, because I think even in the few years that I've sort of been involved in the indie dyers, when I start, like, one of the reasons I started wanting to actually sell the naturally dyed yarn was that everything basically was just superwash, you know, the 75%, 25% nylon. And I thought, I don't like this. And like, I liked all the colors and everything, but there was nothing that I actually wanted to buy, really. And that's sort of what led me to that route.
Isn't there?
Yeah, it didn't make. Yeah. Yeah, it just, like you said, it doesn't have that wool feeling. It didn't feel like you were using wool. But even when I started, I didn't really know what it was, and you know, and then I was always kind of like, oh, it's a bit sort of squeaky, isn't it? Some of that superwash. So kind of, I think once you understand more about the fibers, you understand what to use in which context, right? Rather than
that's right. If you're just, when you first think about it, it's probably, I imagine it's because it's hard to think back to when you as oneself was starting to learn. But yeah, it can seem like an enormous minefield of goodness, what should I use in what situation. And I suppose that's just trial and error and learning, or asking people, because people are always happy to help and try. Because the first few yarns that I bought were absolutely just generic superwash, and I was buying because of the beautiful colours that had been dyed by the amazingly skilled dyers. And it was only through the natural dyeing that it made me sit back and think. So even though I know where wool comes from and how it's produced and so on, it didn't occur to me till I started looking for plain wool to dye myself. It's so interesting how your thoughts just evolve over time.
I think that's exactly how it is, that you just, you know, it's all that, it looks lovely, right? And if you don't know anything about the fibers or how they're going to work, you just buy it because it looks great. But I think that more and more of those indie dyers are starting to use non-superwash bases, that they offer non-superwash bases. I've noticed that over the last maybe year or so. So I hope that as more people buy it, they will, you know, there'll be more demand. And I think when people actually use it, they will realize that it has all those properties that we wanted from the first place. So
you're far more of a unique make out of it if you used a non-superwash yarn and it's breed specific, or it's spun in a certain way, or whatever, and you just end up with something with even more character and story to it, which is just makes it even more precious. So whatever you've turned it into then is even more valuable.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely true. Actually, I guess on like terms of talking about what people are using a lot at the moment, there's a lot of like interest these days in using mohair yarns, like fluffy kind of knits and things. And I know this space also has a bit of mohair in it. And when I did that video about all the stash, I thought, actually, I don't really know anything about mohair, and it's like where it's all produced. And it seems like there's very, very little production in Europe. I think there's one one or two in the UK, but they don't make, you know, kind of a fluffy mohair yarn like the silk one. And then there's some in France, but I wonder if you know anything. It's probably not your field necessarily, but I guess it's a spinning very different. It must be, right, as well.
I think it's such a fine fiber that I imagine that the spinning of it, especially if you dependent on the percentage of it that was in the yarn you were spinning, I think that would make it tricky. I think the limiting factor in Britain is more our climate. So the mohair is grown by cashmere goats, Angora goats, not cashmere goats. Cashmere goats go cashmere. Angora goats grow mohair, I think. And I think they like a really dry climate, and probably quite warm. So I think that's why it's certainly a good chunk of the mohair productions in South Africa, and it's inland in South Africa in the Karoo, in the Kleine Karoo, which are semi-desert. So they will be quite cold at night, but it's just a very dry environment. And so the only people I know in Britain who have anything other than just a handful of mohair Angora goats is Whistlebear. So Alice, in Northumberland, and I think the goats must be out some of the time in the summer, but I think a lot through the winter they have to be housed. So and the British sort of farming industry isn't set up for having cattle are often in through the winter, but our livestock tend to be out all year round. So it would be really hard to set up viable mohair flocks here, because we just don't have the right climate.
It's just too wet. Maybe in Cambridge is quite dry, but I mean, not that dry.
And especially depending on what happens to the environment, maybe we'll end up with.
We did have 35 degrees for like 3 weeks in a row a few years ago, so it would have been good.
They would probably be very happy with that. So I looked into it when I first started thinking. I wanted to produce a sock yarn. So Kalena is intended as a sock yarn, but it's obviously lovely for other things. And I chatted to Laudermill, and we agreed that 20% mohair along with 80% Blueface Leicester would probably be a nice strong blend. Because I wanted to make a natural sock yarn to get around having to use nylon. And at that point, I hunted and hunted for British mohair, but I just couldn't find it. So I guess the very few people who are producing mohair have a market for it.
So they don't sell it on.
Which that's great. It's good that there's a market for it. But so for me, the only option was to buy South African mohair or use nylon or something else in order to give it the strength. So the way I'm working now, I have a much bigger batch spun, and it's spun at Europa, and they buy in mohair anyhow for their own yarns. So I just have a wee proportion of their enormous multiple bales that come in from South Africa. So the limiting things that I don't like about that is I have no control over the farms it comes from, and I would obviously much rather know specifically which farms they come from, but I would be too small a purchaser to try and get. I suppose it would probably be possible to make an individual contact with an individual farm, but then it would be coming over as an individual lot of fibre, which is less environmentally sound as a whole lot coming over on a shipping container. So
it's a challenging one, I think.
These things are. Unless I start growing mohair myself, which I can't.
They are very cute though, the goats.
They're so lovely. Cute. They are.
But maybe not worth the.
No, I think. It's wonderful that Alice obviously manages to do it from Whistlebear, and their yarns are stunning, but they aren't the fluffy silk kid mohair.
No, exactly. It's but they are lovely. I've been meaning to buy something, but I've been agonizing over what I would make with it. So I'm going to continue thinking and then get I don't want to do my classic. I buy like one skein of it and then I don't know what to do. So I'm trying to think of something to make. I think it's nice for like a shawl, maybe.
Yeah,
yeah.
I would imagine. I haven't knit with her the Whistleberry yarns, but I've handled them and they are absolutely lovely. And they're all either grown at Whistleberry itself or locally sourced. So and Alice would be very happy to chat about it, I'm sure.
I'm sure she, yeah, I think I should actually chat with her. I'm sure she will know a lot more on the topic.
She will know so much more about mohair, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe she can show us a little goat. They're just so, I don't know, they're just so cute because they've got like a little fringe, right?
Yeah, and I think they've got quite floppy ears. They are.
Yeah, I can see why you would want to farm them. I bet there are other reasons. Maybe they're not very easy to farm, but they're very cute.
Yeah, I don't know. They're probably more high. I suspect they're a bit more high maintenance than some of our, and I don't know if they're as good at climbing as some goats are, but I suspect you probably need better fencing and.
Yeah, than for sheep. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your precious, valuable goats disappearing down.
No, exactly. They're probably too valuable. So yeah. I guess the only other little things I had in my notes were kind of asking about how long the whole process takes, which I think you talked about already, that you have to book the mill, you know, like 2 years in advance or something so long.
Yes, I think the quickest turnaround would be so the fleeces I buy this summer, they'll go to one of the 4 mills I've talked about, and the ones that have a slot booked, I've got some that have a slot booked in August at the Border Mill, so they'll be back with me in the autumn. The rest will be back hopefully this time next year. So that the other difficulty is
and predicting what you want, right?
Predicting the amount that I need and how much of which, and balancing that out amongst the farms that I work with. And I could always seek out more farms. There's not a shortage of lovely wool out there, but we only want to work with ones that I have a relationship with, and I know that they have good, sound, sustainable farming practices, and that they care for the sheep really well, which in all honesty most British farms do. But you know, I'd still want to be sure about that, and because although I pay so much more than the wool board pay per fleece, and it would more than cover the cost of clipping and so on, it's still, you know, even if I buy 200 kilos of fleece from a farm and I pay really well for it, that amount of money is still a real drop in the ocean in a farming budget. So with the greatest will in the world, I'm a bit of, working with me is a little bit of a pain because they need to set the fleeces aside, or sometimes I'll go on the day they're being clipped. That doesn't usually work out. But so the farms that I'm working with they're people who really want to see their fleece used, and they don't really care about the money side of it. It's nice for them, but they are people who just really want to see this product from their farm turned into something useful, and that's why they're happy to let me hunt around in their wool bags and all the rest of it, because and
do you, like, logistically, what do you do with all of these fleeces? Do you have like a huge,
it's
like a warehouse, garage or something?
No, I need a warehouse or a garage. So I have a problem. So I have a big garden shed, and I can fit. It's amazing how much you can fit in a large garden shed. So I can get about 300 kilos in there.
Wow.
But
it's a very warm shed.
It goes in, and obviously, you know, there'll be, say, 50 kilos of such and such from such and such a farm, and I know I'm making, so for my woolen spun that goes to New Lanark, it's a blend of Shetland and Cheviot and Blueface Leicester. So when I'm picking fleeces from the farm, so I don't take a whole clip, I pick out the best fleeces and I bundle them up and label them, and then I dag them at home and clean them up, and then they go into the shed. And then when I come to be sending it off to the mill, I have to get the right fleeces from the right farms to go into that batch. and keep a track of the weight. I stand on my guard at the bathroom weighing scales, folding up. I can get about 20 or 30 kilos off the ground at a time. Work out the weights so that I get the proportion. It's complete faff, and I don't have a very professional way of doing it. And I could really do with some kind of storage.
Yeah, a warehouse sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any locally that people.
It has to be close enough to not make it a bit of a nightmare to go there, right? So
I probably could ask one of the farms I work with, one of the closer ones, but they then have to have a corner of one of their barns kept clear, and they probably wouldn't mind in the slightest, and I would pay for it, but it would just be another another hassle for them. So I haven't so far asked.
Yeah.
At the moment I manage.
You have to get a second shed.
Yeah.
No, I think that's commendable though, because I don't think people realize like the amount of physical effort that goes into producing yarns. Even like washing all the wet yarns, really heavy.
It is, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. Feel. I don't know about you, but I don't know how you work. I tend to sort of dye intensively for a week or two and then not dye for a while. But I end up tight and sore around here.
Yeah, I think I to be honest, I think we are probably not doing any more dyeing, or not a lot for the foreseeable future, just because work, other work has taken over. But yeah, it is quite hard work, and that's actually one of the reasons we're not necessarily doing it anymore, is just because it's so time consuming.
It's incredibly time consuming.
Yeah, I mean, I think, other people hopefully fill our slot with nice things. There's plenty of things out there, so I think that'll be fine. But yeah, I think it's been really fun, like journey to discover everything. But I think if you don't do it full time, it's quite involved.
Yeah, because if you're doing, yes, there's always the upside of scale, and if you're doing more, although it takes up more space and so on, it is more efficient than smaller amounts. And when you're doing it alongside what I would call a proper job, which is you just
we shouldn't call it that, but
exactly. But you know what I mean.
Employment, official. Yes. So do you do all your black isle yarns kind of full time, or do you also?
Yeah, so it's part-time in and around family. So I don't work full-time, but I don't do anything else.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. You probably work hour-wise quite a lot though, I'm sure.
Yeah, at times. Sometimes I'm working a lot of hours, but it just gives me that flexibility to work around the kids, which is great. So
yeah, I think that's I like having a flexible jobs, and luckily my other job, official job, is also flexible, but quite time consuming as well. So I think I need some less time consuming jobs.
Oh, it's tricky balancing everything out, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's good to have things to do, so I enjoy it. But yeah, I think I've learned a lot already from you, which has been amazing, and I'm really glad that you're putting in your time and effort to do the kind of work. I'm sure it's fun as well, going around and all these places.
It's brilliant. I occasionally have a sort of a bit of a blip, and I just feel harassed and fed up when I can't get the wool in the shed or whatever, and think, I would be so much better off just going back to doing some form of paid employment. But I really like doing this, so. And I suppose I'm very lucky that I'm not forced into being more sensible and going back into paid employment. So I don't think I despite the occasional hissy fit, I think I'm stuck with it.
I think that's completely normal. There are definitely phases with all of these things, but I think it's great to have something where you feel like you're working for yourself, and it also must be really rewarding, right, to see when people have made something and you've been kind of involved with it from like the sheep, well, I guess not rearing the sheep, but
not
at least
quite,
having seen the sheep all the way to like someone actually wearing it. And
Oh,
really...
that's fantastic. It was when somebody turns up at a yarn show or whatever in a finished, or sends a photo of something finished, and that's just the best feeling. And yeah, I really like the relationship I have with the farms I work with. So I had a text this morning, or a WhatsApp from one of the flocks I work with a photo of monkey face. So I have a very, very, very small batch that I produce twice every couple of years called Monkey Face and Co. So it's a ewe called Monkey Face, and she's got two ewe daughters for Wensleydale Cross. So their fleeces are particularly stunning. So I just stock up this year. I'll buy the fleeces and keep them and have a batch spun with next year's clip from them. So it's a tiny wee batch, but it's just such particularly nice wool. And Jane, who owns who farms at Kilgary, sent me a message saying that Monkey Face has had twin lambs recently, and she's 10. So
wow.
Jane wasn't sure she'd make it through the winter. So just having that pop up on my phone this morning with a photo of Monkey Face, and Jane says her fleece is getting a wee bit ropey as she gets older, but it's still lovely. And that's you can't beat that. And then somebody turns up with a finished garment, and
I think it's really incredible to see like the whole journey. And I think I mean, that's why I really like all the crafting kind of environment, because people are also really friendly. Generally speaking, people are like really,
they're very nice about sort of sharing and sharing ideas and things, and also just if they're happy with something that they've used your yarn or whatever. Or I'm sure it must happen with you with patterns too. It must be amazing when you see people coming back having knit things from your own designs.
Yeah, it's a bit peculiar at first, but then you get used to it and you're like, oh, it is really exciting. And I think hopefully I have yet to see some random person walking down the street wearing one.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Well, optimistic. Maybe.
I bet you will one day.
Maybe my sister, I'll see her. That counts, I don't know. But no, I think I've really been enjoying it. And I kind of flitter between like different crafts, all sorts of things all the time. That's, I think, just kind of my personality. But I lately have been getting into sewing, kind of dressmaking, and I feel like I'm doing the whole thing again, trying to figure out what fabric is and all these things. And it's really exciting. And like there's just so much to know about every single tiny little thing, which I think is really cool.
So it sounds like you're somebody who really likes the whole learning and finding out about things.
Yeah,
relate.
And then once I've done it, I move to the next. Not quite. Something to stock.
But it is particularly exciting when you're just learning and absorbing lots of information and constantly finding out new things.
Yeah, it's just incredible. Like you'd never think that there was so much going on with each yarn and each different sheep and everything. So
yeah,
that's quite cool.
I think oh, sorry.
Carry on. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that got me so hooked into knitting and yarn was, as much as I loved sewing and quilting, and I still do a bit of clothes sewing. I struggle for a time, but with the quilt design, it's quite hard it's much harder to know where the where the fabric has come from and how it's been treated. And yes, so you can buy organic. It can be organically dyed and organically produced and so on, but you don't really. It's very hard to know where it was grown and the conditions and so on. So that's where I really fell into the yarn world. But I still love sewing and still love fabric.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is something kind of very satisfying about fabric as well. But I think I started in a different point because I was already aware of all of these things. And you're right, it's very hard to find out where things have come from. And especially when you start out, you don't want to buy something really expensive because you're not very good at sewing. Well, so
I think, I don't know. It's harder to, unless you can always you can rip out your sewing, but if you've cut your dressmaking pieces, then you are kind of stuck with it, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it's less forgiving in some ways.
Yeah,
and
yarn
as you say, you
could undo.
Run the risk of, you do run the risk of not getting the best use out of a load of fabric. It's tricky.
Yeah. It's tricky, but I think hopefully I'll get there eventually,
Well,
or I'll
you
just
will.
continue knitting everything. But I think when I had so many jumpers and so many tops, I was like, I'm not going to knit a dress. It's going to take too long. So I think I'd rather sew that.
Well, and then you could sew your outfit. You can sew your outfits to go with your knits, which is amazing.
Exactly, that's the main reason. No, I think it's great. So I think we chatted about loads of different things. I guess we didn't chat that much about your dyeing process. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add in particular about that, or is it just, well, I mean, I would say just natural dyeing process. I know that's not just by any means, but you know.
I don't think that, I think I'm just a fairly straightforward natural dyer, I guess, constantly learning. And I do use locally gathered plants. So this week I had a commission for just a single skein of a very pale yellow. So the lady had bought a bundle of undyed Shetland DK for a baby blanket. So she's just going to knit up, I think, a big square, and then she wants to crochet an edge on it. So she just wanted a pale yellow. So I went out and gathered some birch leaves. So that's the first fresh dye stuff I've gathered this year. So the nettles are still too small up here to gather. So that was really nice.
Definitely big enough here.
Yeah, well, you'll be so many weeks ahead, I think.
Yeah, I think it looks like summer here now, basically.
No, we had a frost last night, so.
I think we actually did as well, though it was borderline, maybe like 2 degrees or something. Mm-hmm. So it's still cold at night, but not during the day. So, yeah. But yeah, I think that's also yet another thing that's like really cool, is being able to go out and then get the colors as well. And I think you're right, after you spend all that time sourcing all the wool and everything, you don't then want to put loads of like not very nice dyes on it.
Yeah, well, I prefer not to. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I'm finding that I'm trying more and more to use dyes which I don't need to mordant first, and that's limited, but when I can, I am far more than I did early on, just because that cuts out one set of dye bath and rinsing water, and it reduces the alum. And although it's a naturally occurring chemical, it's still an extra an extra material to use. So if you can get lovely colors without having to mordant, then it's good. But it is unfortunately too limited to be able to get a good range without. You do need the mordant in there. Yeah,
it's a lot of sort of yellows and browns.
Yeah, it could get quite 1970s quite quickly.
Yes, pink is, I mean, that's the best, isn't it?
Yeah, I wasn't a pink person, but I really do like it these days. Yeah, really do. And
I've always been pink.
Well, that's good. But it also, cochineal, although it's clearly not locally grown, it is a very potent dye substance, isn't it? So you get a lot of dye, and you can reuse the dye baths. So
it does feel in a way more, I mean, not necessarily more sustainable because you can't grow it yourself, but it doesn't feel like you're using so much, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think you do need to use a fair few individual bugs, but I think on the scheme of things, it's not the worst dye substance to use.
No. And they grow in massive numbers. So
yeah,
I think it's not.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty efficient farming methods that they've developed. Yeah.
And it basically all comes from the Canary Islands, I think.
I think so. I think so, because it was traditionally from South America and Peru, isn't it? And I presume there are still some farms there, but I understand that a lot of the production is the Canary Islands.
Yeah, because when I've been there on holiday, you see like the the big flat cacti, and there's all this like white stuff on it.
Yes.
And that's where the bugs are, and all the cacti everywhere over the whole island are covered in these bugs.
Really?
So I am sure that farming them can't be that hard.
It's not too tricky.
I'm sure someone's going to comment like, no, it's pretty hard, but maybe it's hard. I don't know. But it seems like it wouldn't be. I don't know.
You certainly find, I've spent a little bit of time in Peru, and you certainly, where there are the prickly, I think it's the prickly pear cactus, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is. Yeah.
You certainly find wild cochineal bugs on the prickly pear, so they're not they obviously they're managing to cope pretty well in the wild. They're not a species that's struggling
Endangered or
no, and so I guess if you give them the right conditions, they should be
I can
fairly easy.
imagine they will go.
Yeah.
I'll have to see if I can find any cochineal farmers to ask.
Well, I know that would be amazing. It's these things is just so fascinating to know more about.
Yeah, I have no idea what it would. I'm assuming that you would also be able to sell the prickly pears, but maybe not, because they'll be covered in bugs. So no, I really don't know, but it's an interesting concept. Maybe a fact-finding mission in the Canaries is needed.
Oh, well, you could have a whole series of podcasts with that. Yes, especially if you get to travel for your fact-finding.
I have to go and see that in person, I think, definitely.
Yeah, I think you could justify that.
Yes. Oh, anyway, it's been really great to have a chat. Thank you so much for kind of coming and answering all the questions, and I'm sure there'll be kind of loads of more questions or comments or something, and I can leave all the things we mentioned in the description of the video, so everyone can find all the different things that we mentioned, and links to everything. So yeah, I think that was really great, and it's really great to see you.
It's really nice to see you again. Yeah.
Hopefully another yarn show at some point as well. That would be
well, that would be really, really nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi again. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that chat. Please make sure to leave any questions you have in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer them. And just before we go, I thought I'd give you another little look at Julie's lovely, lovely yarn. I've showed you this before on the podcast, but isn't it just stunning? And from natural colours, can you believe it? Yeah, so this is her sock blend. Yeah, and this has 20% mohair and 80% blueface Leicester, and it's a Killen sock. So yeah, and her label even says local, sustainable and natural. That's how we like it. So yeah, thank you again for listening. Please make sure you subscribe for more videos like this, and also just for updates on my knitting progress. Leave a comment, like the video, and yeah, see you next time.